Hello, Sagittarius. Welcome back, my beautiful souls. I'm really grateful you're here. As always, take what resonates and leave what doesn't, because this is a collective reading and it may connect differently for each of you. Okay, the energy coming through today feels heavy, not in a bad way, just emotional. It feels like someone has been carrying feelings they never fully expressed. Someone who created distance, convinced themselves it was the right thing to do, only to realize that walking away never actually helped them forget. And honestly, the more I sit with these cards, the more it feels like they're starting to understand what they lost when they stopped fighting for this connection. So let's take a look and see what this energy wants to say. Sagittarius, the very first thing I notice is that this person truly believed distance was the answer. Not because they didn't care, not because the feelings weren't there. Actually, it feels like the feelings were exactly the problem. I keep seeing someone who reached a point where everything became too intense, too real, too difficult to explain, and instead of leaning into it, they step back. Moon is sitting here, and the energy around it feels quiet, almost lonely. It's like someone standing in the middle of the night, convincing themselves they're making the right choice, while every part of them feels uncertain. I don't feel confidence here. I feel hesitation. I feel someone talking themselves into leaving, while their heart keeps pulling them in the opposite direction. You know, sometimes people think that if they create enough space, the emotions will eventually settle down. That if they stop calling, stop checking, stop reaching out, then maybe everything will become easier. Maybe they'll gain control again. Maybe they'll stop thinking about the person. Maybe life will return to normal. That's what this person was trying to do. And honestly, Sagittarius, I don't think they expected it to be this hard. Because as I look at the Eight of Cups, it feels like somebody walking away while constantly looking over their shoulder. Their feet kept moving forward. Their thoughts didn't. Their daily life continued. Work continued. Responsibilities continued. Conversations continued. But there was always something unfinished sitting in the background. Always something lingering. Always your energy finding a way back into their mind. What's interesting is that I don't feel like they wanted to admit this. The Seven of Swords is giving me an energy of someone trying to hide from their own emotions. Not necessarily from you. From themselves. Because if they fully acknowledged what they were feeling, then they would have to acknowledge everything that came with it. The vulnerability, the attachment, the longing, the possibility that walking away didn't solve anything. Okay, wow, that feels important. Because this person kept telling themselves they were moving on. Yet every time they thought they had finally put this connection behind them, something pulled them right back into it. A memory, a conversation, a place, a song, the way you laughed, the way you understood them. The way you seem to see through all the walls they worked so hard to build. And the strange thing is, Sagittarius, the more distance they created, the stronger those memories seem to have become. It's almost like your absence became louder than your presence. They stopped hearing your voice, but they couldn't stop remembering it. They stopped seeing your face, but somehow they kept finding it everywhere. Honestly, this feels exhausting. Not for you, for them. Because they're carrying around emotions they never fully dealt with. And every attempt to outrun those emotions keeps leading them back to the same place. Back to the same questions. Back to the same connection. Back to you. The Nine of Swords is sitting here, and the energy feels restless. I keep seeing somebody trying to distract themselves. Trying to stay busy. Trying to focus on practical things. Trying to convince themselves that everything is fine. Yet there are moments when the distractions stop working. Moments when the room gets quiet. Moments when there's nobody else around. And suddenly everything they were trying not to think about comes rushing back. Your name, your energy, the things left unsaid. The things they wish they had handled differently. The distance they created. The silence they maintained. The version of themselves they presented to the world versus what they were actually feeling underneath. And honestly, Sagittarius, I don't feel like this person expected your reaction either. Because what surprises me most in this reading is that you didn't chase. You didn't force. You didn't beg for understanding. You didn't run after them trying to close the gap they created. You allowed them to make their choices. And for some reason, that's becoming impossible for them to ignore. Because the farther they went, the more they expected to look back and still find you waiting exactly where they left you. But the energy doesn't feel like that anymore. It feels like they're beginning to realize life kept moving. You kept growing. You kept becoming more of yourself. And while they were busy trying to escape their emotions, those emotions were quietly growing stronger, not weaker, stronger. And sitting here with the Moon, the Eight of Cups, the Seven of Swords, and the Nine of Swords, I can't help but feel like this person is reaching a point where avoiding their feelings is becoming harder than facing them. Because the strangest part of all of this, Sagittarius, is that you never tried to stop them. You know, I keep looking at the Temperance card, and the feeling surrounding it is incredibly calm. Not passive, not defeated, just calm. It's the energy of somebody who reached a point where they understood that love cannot be forced. That connection cannot be dragged forward by one person alone. And honestly, I don't think they were prepared for that version of you. I don't think they expected you to simply let go of the rope, because for a long time, this person may have assumed that no matter how far they pulled away, no matter how confusing their actions became, there would always be another conversation waiting for them, another chance, another explanation, another effort coming from your side. But something shifted, and I don't feel like it happened dramatically. I don't see a big argument. I don't see a final goodbye. I see something much quieter. I see you waking up one day and realizing that your energy deserved somewhere better to go. Your attention deserved somewhere better to go. Your heart deserved somewhere better to go. Okay, wow, that feels important. Because while this person was focused on creating distance, you were focused on creating peace. Those are two very different things. The distance was about avoidance. Your peace was about acceptance. And there is something about that difference that is becoming impossible for them to ignore. The Strength card keeps pulling my attention. Not because you're fighting. Actually, because you're not. I keep hearing this energy of surrender. Not giving up. Just refusing to chase something that keeps running away. Refusing to spend every day proving your worth to someone who should already see it. And Sagittarius, I have to be honest, I think that's where things started changing for them. Because when you stop trying to convince someone of your value, they suddenly have to figure it out on their own. Nobody is explaining it anymore. Nobody is reminding them anymore. Nobody is standing there asking them to stay. They're left alone with their own thoughts. And for this person, that's becoming uncomfortable. Because the version of you they keep remembering isn't standing still. The version they see in their mind keeps moving forward. The Nine of Pentacles feels beautiful here. I keep seeing somebody rebuilding their life piece by piece, finding joy in small things, learning how to pour energy back into themselves, making plans, creating routines, rediscovering confidence, rediscovering freedom, and honestly, I don't even know if you realize how different your energy feels from before. Because when people go through healing, they often don't notice it while it's happening. They notice it months later. One day they realize they're smiling more. One day they realize they stopped checking their phone. One day they realize they stopped waiting. One day they realize they can think about someone feeling without consumed by them. And that's the energy I feel around you. There's growth here. There's independence here. There's a quiet confidence here that wasn't fully developed before. And the strange thing is, Sagittarius, the more you focused on yourself, the more visible you became to this person. Not because you were trying to get their attention, because you weren't. That's exactly why. You weren't performing, you weren't proving, you weren't chasing, you were simply living. And somehow that became impossible for them to stop noticing. The Queen of Wands is showing up, and the image I keep getting is someone walking into a room without needing approval from anyone, not trying to impress, not trying to compete, just comfortable in their own energy, comfortable in who they are, comfortable in their own skin. And I think this person is beginning to realize that the version of Sagittarius they left behind doesn't exist anymore. That's where some of this anxiety is coming from. Because when they think about you, they don't see somebody waiting by the door. They see somebody building a life, somebody growing, somebody expanding, somebody becoming harder and harder to reach. Honestly, I don't think that was part of their plan. I think a part of them assumed there would always be more time, that they could figure things out later, that they could deal with these feelings eventually, that they could come back whenever they were ready. But life doesn't stand still. People don't stand still. Energy doesn't stand still. And the more they watch you moving forward, the more they're forced to confront a truth they weren't ready to face. You didn't need them in order to continue becoming yourself. Wow, that realization feels heavy. Because I keep seeing this person looking at you differently than before. Not through the lens of comfort, not through the lens of certainty, through the lens of possibility. The possibility that someone they once assumed would always be there might actually be creating a completely different future. And I feel this moment where they're almost trying to catch up emotionally, trying to understand how much has changed, trying to understand how you became so strong, trying to understand why your absence suddenly feels bigger than they expected. Because the more they observe your energy, the more they're beginning to recognize that while they were busy creating distance, You were busy creating a life that no longer revolved around waiting. And that realization is settling into their heart much deeper than they're willing to admit. There's something else coming through here that feels surprisingly tender, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just deeply human. Because as I sit with the Six of Cups, I keep seeing this person revisiting moments they never thought would matter this much. Little moments, ordinary moments. The kind of memories people usually overlook while they're living them. A random conversation that lasted longer than expected. A joke that shouldn't have been funny but somehow became unforgettable. A message they almost didn't reply to. A day that felt completely normal at the time, and yet those are the memories returning to them again and again. It's almost strange. Out of everything life has given them, out of all the experiences they've collected, why are these particular moments refusing to fade? Why is your energy still attached to them? You know, I don't feel like they miss grand gestures. I don't feel like they're sitting there replaying some dramatic scene. What I see are simple moments carrying unexpected weight. The way you listened when nobody else was paying attention. The way conversations with you seemed to move effortlessly from one subject to another. The way they could talk about dreams, fears, ridiculous ideas, and somehow feel understood. Wow, that word keeps coming up. Understood. Because I think that's what they're struggling to find elsewhere. There are people they can talk to. There are people they can spend time with. There are people they can laugh with. But understanding feels different. And what I keep hearing from this energy is that Sagittarius brought a sense of openness into their life that they didn't fully appreciate while it was happening. The star is sitting here and the feeling around it is beautiful, not because of what it promises, because of what it reminds them of. I keep seeing somebody who started viewing life differently after meeting you. Maybe they became more hopeful. Maybe they became more adventurous. Maybe they started imagining possibilities they hadn't considered before. Maybe they started believing that happiness could look different than what they had always settled for. And honestly, Sagittarius, I don't think they connected those changes to you at first. People rarely do. When someone inspires us, we often don't recognize it until they're gone. Only after the conversations stop do we notice how much they shaped our thinking. Only after the connection changes do we realize how much brighter things felt when they were around. And that's where this person seems to be emotionally. They're looking back and realizing that you didn't just occupy space in their life. You expanded it. You made their world feel bigger. You challenged them to think differently, to dream differently, to see beyond limitations they had accepted for years. Okay, that feels really important because what they're missing isn't only you. They're missing the version of themselves that existed around you. The version that felt more alive. The version that felt more curious. The version that felt more optimistic about what life could become. And the more they recognize that, the harder it becomes to dismiss this connection as something ordinary. The King of Cups keeps drawing my attention, and honestly, this energy feels quieter than before, less reactive, less defensive. It's like somebody sitting alone with their feelings instead of running from them, not fully comfortable, not fully confident, but willing to look at them, willing to admit they're there. For some of you, this person may not be saying much externally. They may still appear calm, they may still appear composed, but internally there is a lot happening. A lot of reflection, a lot of realization, a lot of emotional honesty that wasn't available before. And I think one of the things they're finally admitting to themselves is how much your presence affected them. Not because you forced anything, not because you demanded anything, but because your energy naturally brought something out of them. Something authentic, something hopeful, something they had been disconnected from for a long time. The Page of Wands feels almost playful compared to everything else. And the image I keep getting is this person suddenly remembering things that make them smile. Not the painful memories, not the regrets. The good memories. The moments when everything felt easy. The moments when laughter showed up unexpectedly. The moments when they felt excited just to talk to you. Just to hear from you. Just to share something with you. Honestly, I think they're surprising themselves. Because these memories aren't showing up as burdens. They're showing up as reminders. Reminders of how different life felt, how inspired they felt, how energized they felt. And I keep getting this image of somebody driving somewhere, staring out a window somewhere, sitting alone somewhere, and suddenly finding themselves smiling at a memory they weren't trying to think about. A memory connected to you, a memory connected to Sagittarius. And for a moment, everything else fades into the background, the responsibilities, the distractions, the noise, all of it. Because they're beginning to understand that certain people leave fingerprints on our lives long after they walk away. And whether they expected it or not, your fingerprints are still everywhere. They're in the way this person thinks, the way they dream, the way they imagine their future, the way they define connection, the way they define happiness. And the deeper they look into those memories, the more they're beginning to realize that nobody has ever quite made them feel the way you did. And I think that's exactly what has been forcing this person to look at themselves in a way they avoided for a very long time. Because once the distractions lose their power, once the excuses stop making sense, once the silence no longer feels protective, there's nowhere left to look except inward. Okay, the energy shifts here. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but deeply. The judgment card keeps appearing in front of me, and what I feel isn't action. It's awareness. It's somebody waking up to something they can no longer ignore. And honestly, Sagittarius, I don't think this realization arrived comfortably. I think it arrived through discomfort, through questions, through restless nights, through moments where this person was forced to sit with the consequences of their own choices. Because for a long time, they believed the problem was the connection. They believed the feelings were too much, too complicated, too overwhelming, too difficult to manage. But the more they reflect, the more they're beginning to understand that the connection was never the thing they were running from. They were running from what the connection revealed about themselves. Wow, that feels significant because I keep seeing somebody replaying old situations with a completely different perspective. Situations that once seemed justified suddenly look different. Reactions that once felt reasonable suddenly feel fear-driven. Decisions that once felt necessary suddenly feel connected to old wounds. And the strange thing is, they're not blaming you anymore. They're not blaming circumstances anymore. They're starting to recognize patterns. Patterns that existed long before Sagittarius ever entered their life. Patterns that followed them from relationship to relationship, from experience to experience, from chapter to chapter. The death card is sitting here, and it feels incredibly personal. Not because somebody is becoming a different human overnight, but because something old is losing its grip. Something familiar, something automatic, something they've relied on for years. I keep hearing the words, "This is what I always do." You know, some people pull away when things become serious. Some people create conflict when things become intimate. Some people disappear when they're asked to be vulnerable. And what I'm seeing is somebody recognizing their own cycle. Not theoretically, not intellectually, actually seeing it, actually feeling it, actually understanding how many moments of connection have been affected by it. And honestly, I think that realization hurts, because awareness changes everything. Once you see a pattern, you can't pretend you don't see it anymore. Once you understand where your actions are coming from, the excuses begin to lose their power. This person keeps arriving at the same realization. Distance never solved the problem. Distance only delayed the conversation. It delayed the emotions. It delayed the healing. But it never actually fixed anything. The hanged man feels so present here. I keep seeing somebody pausing, not rushing toward an answer, not forcing a solution, just looking at everything differently. And for somebody who spent so much time trying to control how they felt, that's a huge shift. Because they're beginning to understand that feelings don't disappear simply because they're inconvenient. Love doesn't disappear simply because it creates fear. Connection doesn't disappear simply because someone decides not to look at it. And I think they're finally allowing themselves to sit with truths they spent a long time avoiding. Honestly, there is a softness developing here. Not weakness, softness. The kind that comes from self-awareness, the kind that comes from humility, the kind that comes from realizing that growth sometimes begins with admitting you've been wrong about something. I keep getting this image of somebody staring out a window, thinking, reflecting, revisiting conversations they didn't fully understand at the time, revisiting things you said, revisiting things they felt, and realizing there was more truth there than they were willing to acknowledge before. The Three of Pentacles is bringing in a very different energy. For the first time, I don't feel someone trying to escape. I feel someone trying to understand, trying to learn, trying to build something healthier within themselves. Because the focus is changing. Instead of asking, how do I avoid this feeling? They're beginning to ask, why am I reacting this way? Instead of asking, how do I protect myself? They're beginning to ask, what am I protecting myself from? And those are very different questions. Those questions lead somewhere. Those questions create movement, not external movement, internal movement. The kind nobody sees right away. The kind that happens quietly. The kind that changes a person from the inside out. And Sagittarius, what keeps standing out to me is that your absence played a role in this process. Not because you taught them a lesson. Not because you were trying to trigger growth. But because when you stopped carrying emotional weight that didn't belong to you, this person was finally left alone with responsibilities they could no longer hand off to someone else. They had to face themselves, their fears, their avoidance, their habits, their assumptions, their defenses. And little by little, something is beginning to change. I don't feel perfection. I don't feel somebody suddenly having all the answers. Actually, I feel the opposite. I feel somebody realizing how much they still need to understand about themselves. And strangely enough, that realization is making them more open than they've been in a very long time. Because the person who once thought distance was strength is beginning to see that real strength may have looked completely different all along. Because once someone begins telling themselves the truth, it becomes incredibly difficult to keep pretending everything is fine. And honestly, Sagittarius, that's exactly where this energy seems to be heading. Not toward perfection, not toward certainty, toward honesty. The kind of honesty that feels uncomfortable before it feels freeing. I keep looking at the Ace of Cups, and what I notice is how much emotion this person has been holding back. Not because they don't feel it, because they do. If anything, that's part of the problem. They feel more than they're used to admitting, more than they're comfortable showing, more than they've allowed themselves to acknowledge for a very long time. And the strange thing is the more they've tried to suppress it, the more obvious it has become to them. It's almost like carrying a secret that grows heavier every day. At first, it's manageable. Then it starts showing up everywhere, in their thoughts, in quiet moments, in conversations they aren't even paying attention to, in random memories that arrive out of nowhere, until eventually they reach a point where the energy itself begins demanding honesty. Okay, that feels important, because I don't think this person wants to hide anymore. I don't think they want to keep acting unaffected. I don't think they want to keep convincing themselves they're over something they clearly aren't over. The Eight of Wands keeps showing up with this restless feeling. Like someone who has spent so much time standing still emotionally that they're beginning to feel uncomfortable remaining there. You know that feeling when you've been carrying something around for months and suddenly you realize you're exhausted from holding it. That's what this feels like. Emotional exhaustion, not from loving you, from resisting it, from fighting it, from trying to control something that never wanted to be controlled. And honestly, I think they're beginning to understand the difference. Because when they look back, they're seeing how much energy went into avoiding vulnerability, how much energy went into creating distance, how much energy went into maintaining walls. And for what? The feelings never disappeared. The connection never disappeared. The questions never disappeared. Everything they tried to leave behind somehow stayed with them. The Lovers keeps appearing, and the energy feels deeply personal, not dramatic, not impulsive, personal, because I think this person is realizing that every choice carries consequences. Even the choices we make out of fear, especially the choices we make out of fear. I keep seeing someone sitting with a realization they didn't want to face before, that while they were busy protecting themselves from uncertainty, they may have also created distance from something that genuinely mattered to them. And that realization isn't showing up as panic. It's showing up as clarity, the kind that arrives quietly, the kind that changes how you see everything. Wow. There's so much self-reflection here. I keep hearing this energy saying, I understand it differently now. Not because somebody explained it, not because somebody convinced them, because life itself brought them to that understanding, because experience brought them there, because absence brought them there. And for some reason, Sagittarius, I feel like this person keeps imagining conversations they never had, things they never said, questions they never asked, truths they never shared. It's almost like they're mentally rewriting moments they wish they had handled differently. Not to change the past, just because they're finally allowing themselves to acknowledge what they were feeling back then. The Ten of Cups feels softer than I expected. It's not coming through as fantasy. It's coming through as longing, a longing for simplicity, a longing for emotional peace, a longing for connection that feels genuine. And what surprises me is that when they imagine happiness, your energy keeps appearing inside that picture. Not because they're forcing it, because it happens naturally. I keep seeing moments, very ordinary moments, making coffee together, sitting on a couch talking about nothing, driving somewhere with no destination, laughing about something completely ridiculous, growing older while sharing everyday life. And honestly, that's what stands out most. They're not imagining perfection, they're imagining presence, your presence. Because the more they reflect on what truly mattered, the less interested they seem in superficial things, the less interested they seem in distractions, the less interested they seem in appearances. What they're searching for feels more real than that, more grounded than that. And strangely enough, the Temperance card returns here, not as the version we saw earlier. This feels different. This feels like someone beginning to understand balance from a completely new perspective. For so long, they thought balance meant avoiding risk, avoiding vulnerability, avoiding emotional exposure. But the energy feels different now. It's as if they're realizing balance may also require honesty. It may require openness. It may require saying things that feel uncomfortable. It may require meeting someone halfway instead of expecting them to carry everything alone. And I keep getting this feeling that silence no longer feels safe to them. Silence feels expensive, because every day spent saying nothing becomes another day wondering what could have happened if they had simply been honest, if they had simply spoken, if they had simply allowed themselves to be seen. And the longer they sit with that realization, the more difficult it becomes to ignore what their heart has been trying to tell them all along. And Sagittarius, sometimes the most meaningful shifts don't begin with action. They begin with realization. They begin with someone finally understanding what they couldn't see before. And that's the energy I'm leaving you with today. A heart that can no longer hide from its own truth. Thank you so much for being here and sharing this space with me. I appreciate your time, your energy, and your presence more than you know. Until next time, take gentle care of yourselves. Keep moving toward the life that feels true to you. And remember that your journey is always about coming home to yourself first. I'll see you in the next reading. Bye, my beautiful souls.